The mansion was silent. The kind of silence that carried the weight of absence, polished marble floors echoing back the sound of nothing, chandeliers glittering for no one, and walls painted in wealth but stripped of warmth. It was in this mansion that Michael Harrington, a man known in every financial magazine as a self-made millionaire, returned home late one night. He had built his empire from scratch, a story the world admired, but inside, he carried an emptiness he never let anyone see. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving him with their only child, a little girl named Ella, who was now just 2 years old. Michael loved his daughter more than anything, but grief and endless work had made him a distant father. He couldn't bring himself to be the bedtime storyteller, the lullaby singer, or the one who held her through midnight tears. He paid the bills, provided the best life possible, but what Ella needed, love, comfort, touch, he didn't know how to give. So he hired a nanny. Not the polished, uniformed women agencies often recommended, but a quiet young woman named Sophie, who had walked into the interview with worn shoes, a modest dress, and a resume that held no prestigious names. She had worked in a daycare center, had babysat neighbors' kids, and came from a poor background. But when Michael had asked, "Why should I hire you?" she had looked him straight in the eye and answered softly. "Because I know what it's like to need someone, and not have them." Something in her voice, a tremble, a truth, had made him pause. Against the advice of his staff, he hired her. That night, when he returned home, briefcase in hand and exhaustion clinging to his shoulders, he noticed the nursery door slightly ajar. A dim glow spilled out, the nightlight shaped like a small moon casting gentle shadows across the hallway. Curious, he stepped closer. And what he saw stopped him cold. On the plush nursery rug, Sophie was lying on the floor, her body curled protectively around Ella, who was asleep on her tiny chest. The crib nearby was empty, untouched. Sophie's arm cradled the toddler securely, and though her own back must have been aching against the floor, she hadn't moved. Her cheek rested lightly against Ella's hair, and even in sleep, she held the child as if she were her own flesh and blood. Michael's throat tightened. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen anyone hold his daughter like that, not since his wife. He stood there for what felt like forever, watching the scene. Sophie could have easily placed Ella back into her designer crib, surrounded by expensive stuffed animals, and gone to sleep in her own room. But instead, she had chosen the hard floor, simply to make sure the little girl felt safe. Michael quietly stepped back, retreating to his study. But for the first time in a long time, his mind wasn't on balance sheets or business deals. It was on a young woman who loved his daughter with a selflessness money couldn't buy. The next morning, Sophie woke with a sore back but a smile. She gently placed Ella in the crib and tiptoed to the kitchen, where she started preparing breakfast. She didn't expect praise. In fact, she tried to stay invisible most of the time. After all, she was just the help. But as she stood at the counter scrambling eggs, she heard a voice behind her. "You slept on the floor last night." Sophie froze, her cheeks flushing. She turned and found Michael standing there, his suit jacket draped over one arm, his eyes studying her not with the cold scrutiny she usually saw in his meetings, but with something softer. She wouldn't settle," Sophie stammered, embarrassed. "She kept crying when I put her in the crib, and I didn't want to wake the whole house." "It wasn't a big deal." "Not a big deal?" Michael repeated quietly, almost to himself. He tilted his head, watching her. "You could have called one of the maids. Or me." Sophie gave a small, sad smile. "Some things a maid can't fix. Some things a father should, but if he can't, then someone has to." Her words pierced deeper than she intended. She quickly lowered her gaze, pretending to busy herself with the pan. Michael didn't reply. He simply walked away, but her words stayed with him like an echo. Days turned into weeks. Michael found himself noticing Sophie more often, not in the way tabloids might spin, but in the small, human moments that stripped away the walls around his heart. He saw the way she knelt on the floor building block towers with Ella, clapping enthusiastically when they toppled. He saw her whispering lullabies in the kitchen while she cooked, melodies that didn't belong to any music chart but somehow soothed even him when he passed by. He saw her sitting on the porch steps with Ella in her lap, pointing out stars in the night sky as if she were teaching the child to dream bigger than the walls around her. And one evening, after a grueling meeting that had left him feeling hollow, Michael came home earlier than usual. He stood at the door to the playroom and overheard Sophie speaking softly to Ella. "Your daddy loves you, sweet girl," she whispered, stroking the child's hair. "He's just hurting too. Sometimes people who hurt the most don't know how to show love. But it's there. I promise you, it's there." Michael leaned against the wall, his chest tightening. He had spent years convincing himself that burying his grief was strength, that building his empire was the way to honor his wife. But here was Sophie, poor, ordinary Sophie, teaching his daughter the truth about love in ways he himself had failed to do. For the first time in years, he felt tears sting his eyes. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He paced his study, staring at old photographs of his late wife and his daughter as a baby. He realized how much time he had lost, how much love he had kept locked inside. And it shook him to the core. He found himself walking back to the nursery, quietly pushing the door open. Sophie was there again, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Ella asleep in her lap. This time she wasn't sleeping herself, she was humming softly, eyes closed, rocking the child with a tenderness that broke him. "Sophie," he whispered, his voice rough. She looked up, startled. "Mr. Harrington, I didn't hear you." "Michael," he corrected, almost desperately. "Please, call me Michael." Their eyes met. And in that fragile silence, something shifted.